Okay, that's Hashem. Okay, everybody say, Hazman Kotzer, V'amalacha Meruba. We have today to try to finish up some of the very Geshmaka Shilas that are every Shabbos Shilas, every single Shabbos Shilas. Are you allowed to take food straight out of the fridge, which has been obviously previously cooked, or straight out of the freezer, challah, which has maybe no condensation? I don't want to get involved in the frost and all that shilah. Uncooked liquid, but a challah that was wrapped properly, and you want to take that challah and you want to somehow make it hot on Shabbos. There's no problem of noilad. It's a salad. There's no problem. You want to make it go from a cold salad to a hot salad. What do I do? To put it straight on the hot plate? We don't seem to be able to do that. Can I take an upside down bekel, an upside down pan, put it on the hot plate, on the blech? Can I put it on the cholent pot? Now, most of us know the result. We know what's going to come out. But the beauty over here is if you understand the sugya, it could be different nafkaminas that we never even dreamed of. We're going to try to talk about that. There's different people, they have on haga, that they have a potato kogel on a chicken soup as of when Shabbos came in. Then they take off the chicken soup, and then they take that potato kogel and they put it onto the hot plate on Shabbos. Does that stem with what we learned? We'll have to talk about that. And then Amit Hashem, we'll try to get to the big shaila of what do we do if our cholent is actually burning out based on everything that we learned and everything that we haven't learned yet. What do we do if the cholent is burning out? This Bez Hashem, let's try to go through the sugya. Very Geshmaka sugya, as you see, there's a stira, Geshmaka terutzim. How often do you have that the Bir Halacha, he says the words that he found in the Prima Godim, and he says I think his lashon was a very Geshmaka teretz. Let me just look. I think his lashon was he says Matzazi in the Prima Godim Yishiv betuv tam. So let's see Bez Hashem. Let's go first slowly. We'll go through the stira. We'll go through the patzel beturutzim and the big nafkamina. Now I don't know the oilam over here. I don't know if I'm a day older than the oilam. I think I might be a day younger than the oilam. But I remember about 30 years ago. Oh Hashem, I could say that. But I remember about 30 years ago that there was this new hamtzah called the Kedera Blech. Does anybody remember the Kedera Blech? It didn't last very long. And that's also going to be part of the Shaila. What's the din of a Kedera Blech? It was some type of hamtzah that there's somebody had an idea that you'll take a blech for all intents and purposes, 2 pieces of metal, and in between put water. And then you'll put fire underneath it. In other words, you'll put it on your stovetop. And then afterward, on Shabbos, you'll be able to put not uncooked liquids or not uncooked food or not even cooked liquids, but any food, a solid food like a challah, like a potato kugel. This will be for somebody who has a dry cooked salad and he doesn't have a cholent pot that he can put on his potato kugel. So this is a hamtzah called the Kedera Blech. I'm sure some of the oilim remembers it and probably wonders what happened to it. It seemed to have gone out of style very quickly. So let's try to down this shiloh and get to the halacha l'maisa. And then, of course, what about a person who wants to stand put an upside down pan without food in it? What's the halacha? Now, Rabbi Yisai, I just want to mention one thing, which is an aside, but once we're in the sugya and we're trying to get halacha l'maisa, I'll just mention bekitzer. If you're going to, whatever we're going to talk about today, but if you're going to take a challah and put it on the cholent pot, then we know already that's really mefurish and sifhei. That it's mutter laseis apei kteres chamim b'Shabbos atavshos nisbash b'Shabbos. We know, Clara, you're going to be allowed to take a potato kugel, you're going to be allowed to take schnitzel, you're going to be allowed to previously cook schnitzel, previously potato kugel, a challah. We know, assuming you don't have liquid shilas, we know you're going to be allowed to take that and put that onto a cholent pot on Shabbos. Why, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to try to figure out today. But we know that's allowed. Mamish,
the Rav going to discuss Mechem L'Mechem also? Or are we going
Bez Hashem, that we're going to discuss at the end. Bez Hashem.
Okay. Returning a order.
I wanted to start with this because we'll see how it builds up to everything. Now, just a disclaimer, when you talk about this topic, make one disclaimer. There's a different issue, is making your bread fleishiks. There's a shaila in general, you're not allowed to make fleshik breads. When I take challah and I put it on top of a cholent pot, so now that cholent, the blias go straight through because it's shas bishul, the blias go straight through, and that challah is now fleishiks. Okay, it could be it's not usher to do it because you're doing it for a limited amount of time. But you have to remember, you cannot be having that challah with your French toast on Sunday morning. The eitzah to avoid this is that if you take one piece of silver foil and you put it between your pot and your challah, so now in order for the bliya to travel, it would have to travel between two dry surfaces, my pot and the silver foil. So that's called ein bliya yoitze mikdera kedera without roitiv. And that, before I speak about, you should just know, sometimes your potato cook, you don't care if it's fleishiks, but your challah, you might, yeah. So just keep in mind that if you're going to be doing this, you should put a piece of silver foil on top of the challah, on top of the lid, so that you don't have any issues with the basad chalav or I did mine, I made my disclaimer. Now the shaila comes again to Shulchan Aruch, and he tells us it's mutter to put a potato kugel, some type of panadish, some cooked individual. It sounds like you could take him straight from the fridge. There's no liquid condensation. It sounds like you could take him straight from the fridge and put him on top of a cholent pot. And why? The Shulchan Aruch says, because ein derech bishul b'kach. That's a very weird way of cooking, for the same price. It would sound like from the Shulchan Aruch, I could take a challah and put it on a radiator. Nobody cooks on a radiator. And the whole sugya we're dealing with over here is mechzik mevashel. It looks like cooking. So over here, there's nobody that's going to say that when this person is taking a challah and putting it on a radiator, it looks like cooking. The same thing. No one's going to say when he takes a challah. I'm obviously talking about a radiator without dials because you can get involved in the shami yachata. But no one's going to say if I take a challah and I put it on top of a cholent pot, that the guy looks like he's cooking. It's a very weird way of cooking. Nobody cooks like that. That's a seemingly pashut shot what it says in Shulchan Aruch. And Shulchan Aruch seems to say that it's mutter.
Let's put on Sifei. Let's put on Sifei, please.
That's Sifei. So then that's l'chayra. Very, very simple. And it sounds like from the Shulchan Aruch, I do not require the T'nai CHAZARA. I don't need Oita B'yadai. I don't need Daita Lachzar. All I need is simply a cholent pot, and I can take it straight out of the fridge. If it was in the fridge, Rabbi Say, it has not been on the fire when Shabbos came in. And it's certainly not Oita B'yadai, and it's not Daita Lachzar. And it sounds like I can take those schnitzels, those cooked, baked schnitzels already, the baked schnitzels, I could take them and put them on top of the cholent pot. And I think most of us are aware of this. And most of us probably do this every Shabbos. Okay, this comes again, the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Gimel, and it seems to be an absolute stira. Shulchan Aruch in Sif Gimel says that if a person on Shabbos morning wakes up and he sees that his cholent is burning, he's afraid it's going to get even more burned. And that we're going to have to talk later. Are there any eitzes to put water in the cholent, cooked water? So it says you could take off the cholent, and what you could do is you could take it off and put it on a kedera rekonnis. You take another pot, the stomach, turn it upside down. The pot, you make a blech. Making a blech on Shabbos is not a problem. It's machlekes chazanish and Ramosha. If you take something like a piece of metal and cook it, that's mafurish in the Gemara that they could be bishul. But Ramosha says there's no chatzi shir on a piece of metal. By taking it and putting it on a fire, it's not going to get to red hot. Chazanish says maybe there is a chatzi shir, but the beginning of Makubal is taka like the Ramosha. You'd be allowed to take a blech and put it on the fire on Shabbos. No problem. You see, your cholent is on a fire, and you see it's burning out. So what do? Take a piece of metal, put it on the fire. It's obviously going to lessen the chayim of the fire. And now you'll be able to take your cholent and put it back on. Till now, your cholent was burning out because it was on the fire. If you put, I think it's called a simmer, I think. It may be, or like a blech. You take a piece of metal, you take a pot, turn it upside down, and put your cholent on it. So now the fire won't be as aggressive against the cholent. And you can do that on Shabbos. But the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, they warn over and over again that when you take the cholent off, when you're making now the blech, you got to have a friend. If you're going to take off the cholent and put it on the karka, and then take the piece of metal and put it on the fire, and now you want to put it back. So it's true, you don't have a problem of groof of a ketuma, because now my fire is going to be covered, but you're going to have a problem that it's no longer like the biyad, yeah, but it's a la karka. And the Ramah says, well, don't worry because you have the ran, but everyone agrees that beside, I need the T'nai CHAZARA. Just, I have the T'nai CHAZARA, I have the biyadai, I have the lachzir. You must have, in this case, the T'nai CHAZARA. So what am I doing, Rabbi Say? I'm taking a cholent, I'm taking a pot, I'm putting it upside down on the fire, and I must make sure that I don't put it on the floor. So I certainly cannot take it out of the fridge. I certainly can't take from the fridge a schnitzel and go on Shabbos and put it on a pot, which is on the fire, and put it on top of the pot. Frekt the Gdoile Achrayim, the Dogam Mavava, the Mishabur brings down the Dogam Mavava, the Prima Godim, others. They ask Mamasha Astir in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch seems to say over here that I do need the Tanai Chazara. When I want to take something from a fridge, I can't take it and put it. The only time that the Mishabur was the Shulchan Aruch was makel is if I take a pot and I'm making sure it's daitalach there, everything, I'm not putting it on the karka. And even if I make the blech on Shabbos, no problem, but you have to have the Tanai Chazara. So over here it seems to be that we need the Tanai Chazara. Mashenkin over there, when it talks about the case of the cholent, which is on the fire, and you want to take a schnitzel from the fridge, there's obviously no Tanai Chazara there. I'm putting it onto a pot. Nobody knows what's going on in the fire. It doesn't say there's group of ketuma. It doesn't seem to say that there's any problem of needing daital axer. Nothing. You can come straight from the karka. You come straight from the fridge. It's affected bir lacha mamish gevaldik kasha. Do I need the Tanai Chazara when I'm not going straight onto the fire? In one place it says I'm not going straight onto the fire, and I need the Tanai Chazara. That's by the case of Siv Gimel. You're putting a black, you're not going straight onto the fire. You need the Tanai Chazara. Mashen came when it comes to Siv Hey. I'm putting it on a pot. I'm doing the same thing. I'm putting it on a hefsek on the fire, not putting it straight on the fire. And it seems to say I don't need the Tanai Chazara. This is the grace akasha of the Dagam Ravav. Now the Dagam Ravav has a teretz. He says a chiddush that I mentioned last time. I think Rabbi Gottesman asked also. I mentioned that there's a sheet of the Ran that says that if you have something that is baked, so then it's not so simple that it's included in the Isser of Chazara, at least on top of a stovetop, because nobody bakes things on top of a stovetop. You fry, you cook, but you obviously can't bake a challah. So there are those that say the whole surah, the Ran says, there is no mechs. Excuse me. The Ran says that there is no mechs yikimavashal when you're dealing with a baked product. As I said, the Ran, it's not so makubal in the paiskim this, but the Dogam Mavava wants to answer. That'll be the answer. The Sif Hay is talking about when I'm talking about a panadish, it's a baked good, and nobody bakes goods on top of a fire. So therefore, that's why. When you take it and put it on top of the cholent pot, then it's going to be mutter. There's no machzik mavashal. According to that, it'll also be mutter lefi that to put it on put it on a blech also lefi that. As long as there's something blocking the fire. So on Shabbos lefi that, you can take a schnitzel and put it straight onto the blech lefi the Dagam Ravav. Because so long as you're blocking the fire and it's not something that's normally cooked, it's something that's normally baked. So the Dagam Ravav is meikol. Mashen King Siv Gimel. What was Siv Gimel talking about? It's talking about a cholent. Over there, it's much worse. Then you need all the tznayim, not to put it on the karka. That's the teretz of the Dagam Ravav. Of them teretz zok the Helika Rebbe, the Mishnah Berurah. As their teretz zok the Rebbe, sedochik. As I zok the Be'er Locha. But Tassin the Dagam Ravav, he was nidchak with this. He says, "Ein panadish darkar lefais." It's a doichik gadol. The mechaber le'sfira later on. I mentioned before that this sheet of the Ran, that things that are baked in the inside, we're not going to have the chumrah of Mexican bash on the outside. It's not brought in the Shulchan Aruch bichlal. The poskim don't seem to go with it, and to say that the Shulchan Aruch is going with it is a doichik gadol. But then the Bialacha says that he found a teretz in the Prima Godim, and he's miyashiv betuv tam. That's very important. What's in simplicity, where the Velt says over the teretz that there's a difference between the teretz of the Prima Godim. The difference in Siv Hay is talking about that the cholent pot is full. When the cholent pot is full, it's mutter. Mashain King Siv Gimel is talking about like a blech, like a pot. There's nothing in it. If there's nothing in it, so then it's aser. Then you need the Tanai Chazar. Now, what's the chilek if there's food inside or not food inside? This Abba says is very important to understand the lumps. There's different ways you could learn, and it can make a tremendous nafkamina. Some say, it's one is more stranger than the other. If there's food inside, that's a very weird way of cooking. Mashenkein, if there's a blech, So then there's no food inside, and I'm taking food and putting it on top of a blech. It's not Mexican vashal. It's still Mexican vashal because it's not as weird. That's in my opinion, that's a weird teretz. They're both strange. Does anybody here know people that cook on top of pots? No. Does anybody know people that cook on top of blech? No. So you're going to say on Yom Tov, we put on a blech shkoyach, but you don't cook. Nobody cooks on a blech. You can maybe warm things up. So you're going to say, but in the restaurant, they have the pancakes that they put on that long sheet of metal. Okay, say that. You have to find one weird case. But it's also, that's not what the Bir Halacha says. The Bir Halacha doesn't say, Sifei, it's very weird, super weird, because you're putting something on top of a challah pot, and that's so not normal way of cooking, therefore it's not a Mexican mavash. Mashenke and Sif Gimel is somewhat normal. It doesn't say that. What does he say? The words in the Bir Halacha, listen closely. The words in the Bir Halacha, I'll read it to you. Matzasin the Prima Godim, Ayri be'oimedis al gabe ktei raschamin. Oitav shel Sifei is talking about where it's on a pot which has food inside of it. Lo nefchav oimid al akira. When there's a cholent pot and I'm putting a potato kugel in the cholent pot, on top of the cholent pot, Derech Agav, Shlomo Zalman Claris, can I put it in the cholent pot? If I can take a pot and put it in the pot, it's submerged a little bit. That's maybe we'll leave for Atamana. Or is it no? It's got to be on the pot. But let's take on right now that it's on the pot. Says the Bir Halacha, when I take a potato kugel and I put it on the pot, so then since, says the Bir Halacha, it has food inside of it. So then when I ask you, where did you put your potato kugel? So what are you going to answer me? You're not going to say, I put it on the fire. No, you're going to say, since there's food in the cholent pot over there, you're putting it on a pot, you're putting it on a where did you put it? You're going to say, I didn't put it on the fire. You're going to say, I put it on the pot. And therefore it's mutter. Mashen came by the case of the Kedei Rekonis, and it's there. Now listen to the words of the Bir Halacha. You put it there, rak listoim chaymakira. The reason why you put the metal there is to be mafchis techaim shalei kol kacham. You dafka put it there in order to make it that it shouldn't be hot. That means that the piece of metal is servicing the fire. It becomes one with the fire. Nasa kira, this kira becomes a grufa ketuma, take a fire. You know what he's saying over here? He's saying fal de kavor, the Bir Halacha. The Bir Halacha is not just saying a difference. Is there food? Is there not food? Is it an empty pot? Is it not an empty pot? Bir Halacha is saying alumnus. When is it Mexican mavashal? When I take a schnitzel out of the fridge and I put it on a cholent and I ask you, where did you put it? So what are you going to answer me? You're going to say, I put it on the fire? No. You're going to say, I put it on the pot. There's no derech bishul on a pot. That's where I put it. Mash ein kain. When you ask me, when I take a schnitzel and I put it straight onto a blech, so now what's a blech? A blech is there to be mafich the chayim, to lessen the chayim. So now when I take a piece of metal and I put it on a fire, so then it all becomes one big fire. So now when I ask you, where did you put your schnitzel? You're going to say, on the fire. So the piece of metal becomes one with the fire, and that's being mashamish the fire. So therefore, where did he put his schnitzel? He put it on the fire. Oh, that's already Mexican mavashal. So that's how the Bir Halacha learns. Where did I put it? Did I put it on the fire or did I put it on the pot? So Sif Gimel requires the Tnoyim, because there you put just a piece of metal, you're blocking the fire, and therefore the fire is being mishtam. The blech is mishamish. It's working together with the fire. It's lessening the chayim of the fire, so it works together with it. Oh, so you took your schnitzel and you put it on the fire. That's Mexican mavashal. The fact that it's weird, we don't start saying these types of things. Going and putting food on a fire on Shabbos is Mexican mavashal. Mashain kain, and there you need the Tanai CHAZARA, therefore you can't take it from a fridge. Mashain kain, when I'm taking a potato kugel, I'm putting it on top of a cholent. So the potato kugel on the cholent, I'm not putting it on the fire. I'm putting it where? On somewhere else. Besides, it's not Mexican mavashal. It doesn't look like I'm by the fire. I'm somewhere else. If you listen well, this is not how the Chazain Ish learned the teretz of the Prima Godim. The Chazain Ish in Siman Lamed Zayin and Sif Tes, he says different words. Everybody say. He says when I'll read you his lashon. When the bottom pot is filled with food, it's baleya the chayim akira ve'ein achayim oila le'elyon ela michayim akdeira. Chazon Ish says a more ridiculous this over here, Rabbi Isai. Siman Lamed Zayin at the end of Sif Kat and Tes. Right at the end over there. The Lashon of the Chazon Ish is brilliant. The Chazon Ish says, when I have a potato kugel that I'm putting on top of a pot, he says, you know what the chiluk is? A potato on the pot, where's it getting the heat from? Is it getting heat from the fire? He says, no. It's getting heat from, it's a mechudishtik way of looking at it, but it's getting the heat from the food, and I'm not getting heated up from the fire. That's how the Chazon Ish looks at it. By the case of a Kedei Rekonis, there, he says, where's the fire coming? Where's the Chaim? The Chaim comes straight from the fire. Now, this is not the same thing as the Bialacha. If you listen well, Rabbi, I just said two different words. One is if you ask the person, where's he going? He says, I'm going to the chalin pot. That's how the Mishnah Berurah learns. And that's why it's mutter, because I'm on the fire. It says, I'm going to the fire. You're on the metal. Yeah, but the metal is working together with the fire to be mafis the Chaim of the fire. So that's called I went to the fire. The Chazon Ish is saying different words. Chazon Ish is saying the chilik between, they're both learning in this in the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim just says two words. The Pri Megadim just says, there's a difference between Sif Hey, Sif Gimel, there's food, there's not food. The Chazon Ish says, yeah, when there's food, it absorbs the Chaim and you're getting heated up from the food. Oh, if you're getting heated up from the food, that's considered that you're not by the fire. But the Kedei Rekonis, that goes straight because nothing absorbed the Chaim of the food didn't absorb the Chaim of the fire. I could think of two gewaldige nafkaminas, and I think the Olam is going to chap a lot on no. Nafkamina number one is going to be the Kedei Blech. Now, I don't know exactly what happened. Kanira, the mamtzi of this Kedei Blech, the person's idea was, again, what was it? Two pieces of metal, and they put water in between. They looked at Sifei, and they saw Sifei says you're allowed to have a pot. Inside the pot is food, and you're allowed to put on top of the pot a potato kugel. So they said, what do you want? That's Sifei. That is very true if you learn like the Chazon Ish. Because according to the Chazon Ish, what's the vort of having a pot with food that we're allowed you to put? The vort that we allow you to put potato kugel on top. The answer is because the heat is going to get absorbed inside the food. So therefore, when you're getting heated up on top, your potato kugel on top of the Kedei Blech is being heated up from what? It's being heated up from the liquid. It's not being heated up from the fire. So that's not called them on the fire because it was absorbed. Mashenkein, a regular blech. So there the fire just goes straight through and nothing absorbs it. Mashenkein, if you learn the way we're learning in the Mishnah Berurah, that the Pshat says the Mishnah Berurah nothing to do with food absorbing or not absorbing. The Mishnah Berurah says, the Lambda says, where am I? So when there's a pot here, I'm not on the fire. I'm on top of a pot. Masha'enkein in Sif Gimel, there was a piece of metal that was being put to be meshamish the fire, to work together with the fire. So here, what's the whole purpose of the Kedei Blech? It has no eigenkeit at all. It's a gewaldige onof. It's the whole purpose of the Kedei Blech is for one purpose, to enable you to put things on the fire. So that's a direct hipper to the lumdis of the Mishnah Berurah. So Kedei, those that were mamsi, it held like the Chazon Ish. I, at the time, was told that Rav Elyashiv held not like the Kedei Blech. I don't know what the cheshbon was. But Lefi, what we're saying, it's gewaldik. Rav Elyashiv obviously learned that, like the Mishnah Berurah, that the way a Kedei Blech works, it's a direct steerer to say Kedei Blech. The whole lumdis of a Kedei Blech is that I'm bringing you something that will enable you to use the fire. That can't be. That's a hippocrite in svara. If I have a pot, so that I'm not going to the fire b'chal. I'm not on the fire. So that's mutter. Mashiach over here, this entire hamtzah is for one purpose, to just make sure that he could use the fire. So there's no after. Now, if there would be mamsi, a Kedei Blech that would have a spout, and you would actually use the water on Shabbos, like, an urn, then Avada, I can hear that such a thing would be mutter. Because now you're not saying that the whole thing is just one eretim to get to the fire, that I can get my potato kugel on the fire. Adrabah, it's a hamtzah to be able to get water also. Some then I can hear Bein Lefi the Chazon Ish, Bein Lefi the Mishnah Berurah. That Rabbi Isai is nafkamina number one. Nafkamina number two is the famous shaila that the Shevet Levi speaks about. Very famous in Chelek Aleph. The Shevet Levi is in Siman Tzadi Aleph. And he discusses, there's a few Shevet Levis actually, but I think could be that's Yeah, that's the one. The Shevet Levi declares another shaila. We've been discussing till now taking a pot that has cholent in it and putting potato kugel on it. A lot of people, when they have the shilas, they don't have a cholent pot. So what they want to do is they want to take an upside down beckel and put it on a hot plate or on a blech, and then take the potato kugel and put a schnitzel on top of it. So here, it's going to come out of fakert and nafkamina. Lefi the chazain ish, that's going to be more usser. Lefi the chazain ish, what are you gaining? You're taking one blech, you're taking another blech, but there's no heat getting absorbed. You just have a lot of metal over here. The heat only gets absorbed into food. The Chazon Ish said, when there's food, it absorbs. So therefore, you're not on the fire. Here, there's no food. Mash ain't if you learn the way that we're learning in the Mishnah Berurah, the way he learns up the Prima Godim, that where are you going with the schnitzel? Are you going on the fire? I'm not going on the fire. The fire is there, and the fire already has avchasas chayim. The fire already has a minimized chayim from the blech that you have there. That's the fire. Where am I? I'm on top of the pot. Such a thing could be mutter. And that's why the Shevet Levi and Rishlam Zalman were talking mekel. Now, I admit that last svara is not muchach. And you could have said, well, you mean I'm only taking a piece of metal in order to enable me to put the food straight on. So therefore, maybe that's also called bottle to the fire. But here, by side, we have a few other svaras over here. Number one, there's a need in a hot plate in general. Some say a hot plate is not the derech bishul. People don't cook on hot plates. They warm things on hot plates. So maybe the whole place is mufka from Merci. Okay, if there be knobs, that's a problem. But today, most of them don't have knobs. So maybe, anyways, I could take something, a schnitzel straight out and put it onto a hot plate. Because not a fire, it's a warming apparatus. That is not so makubal in the Paiskin. They weren't so makabel. Or Moshe, there's different shilas how to read those chuvas. They weren't written by Rav Moshe. Okay. But if a zayvite, with the svara that you're putting a hot plate, you're putting an upside down pan, and you have that svara plus maybe a hot plate b'chlaus, but no, that's one way you could be mako by taking a schnitzel and putting it on an upside down pan on a hot plate. Another thing is sometimes you have a blech, old fashioned piece of metal, and you take the pot, you put it straight on the fire, then you can hear this shiloh. But let's say I take the pot, upside down pot, and I put it not right over the fire. I put it near the fire. On the blech is a whole area. There's a fire over here, and I put it near it. So that might get involved by say in a sugi of smicha, and there's a whole shaila about that. So that maybe we'd be able to be meiko. So to make a sikum, then on part one, Rabbi say, part one sikum, if you have a cholent and you want to take a potato kugel and put it on top, no problem. If you want to put a piece of silver foil in between that you don't have flake issues, even better, no problem. A kedera blech will be totally in the two ways how to learn what is the answer to the stira in the Shulchan Aruch between Gimel and Hay. Two ways to learn the Prima Godim. If you learn that the pshat is that heat is absorbed in the food, so then a kedera blech won't be mutter. Mashenkin, will be mutter. Mashenkin, if you learn that the lumdus is the heter was only because I'm not going to the fire, but if you have something which is being mashamish the fire, avadi going to the fire. So then the kedera blech lefidat is going to be us. And now I must tell you that also with the hot plate that I mentioned to put an upside down pan, that'll be the second nafkamina. I said even on probably to put it straight on the fire, the Chazon Ish won't be mutter. The way we learned in Mishnah Berurah, maybe it will be mutter, but that's a shiloh. You have to keep in mind another thing, Rabbi said. The Dagar Mavava, it's also going to be mutter anyways, because the Dagar Mavava over here was mitzaref the ran. So now there's another cheshbon to be makel. If I want to take a schnitzel and put it on a upside down pan on a hot plate, harbe reasons to be makel. Number one is a hot plate not so pashut in the first place is maxi. Number two is Rav Vosner's cheshbon that a upside down pan, that's considered I'm not going on the fire, I'm somewhere else. And now number three, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with a challah, you're dealing with a potato kugel, things that anyways are baked, and therefore the Ran held they were mutter anyways to put on top of a fire on Shabbos. That's Rabbi said part one. Any shayla drug of weiter? Okay. Okay, so now Rabbi say we'll go to part two of this. I want to give you some food for thought, and then it's a Shem, and this time hopefully we'll get to the end. We'll get to Pina Mimechel Lemechel. I want you to think about something, Rabbi say. There are many people that have a minig, and I want to explain this minig because if you're doing it wrong, It might be minig oisius gehenim. And there's a way to do it, which isn't minig, and it might be mutter gomer. What's the shaila? Shaila is, we just discussed, I'm allowed to take a potato kugel out of the fridge and put it onto a cholent on Shabbos, onto the cholent pot. That's mutter, that's mefurish in Shulchan Aruch, no shaila. Rabbi say, that means, in Lumdis, if you think about it, when I'm taking a potato kugel or a challah, and I'm taking it out of the fridge, and I'm putting it on the cholent pot, that means you don't need the Tanai CHAZARA. So I guess that means you didn't go to the fire. Ki'ilu, kivyachol, I'm still in the fridge. If you ask me, where's this potato kugel? It's still in the fridge. Now, by say, does this make sense that I should be able to do something like this? There are some people, as of Erev Shabbos, they have a challah on, let's say you're a potato kugel, on the chicken soup pot. They take off the chicken soup. Now, what do they do with the potato kugel? They put it straight down onto the blech. There are many people in Kallus that they have that meaning to do that every Friday night. They take there's no room on the blech. They take the potato kugel, they put it on top of the chicken soup. Then they take off the chicken soup. They take that potato kugel and then they put it down, in the place of where the chicken soup was. Now, by side, let's try to figure this out. They just took it straight from the fridge and put it onto the fire. I'll prove to you they took it straight from the fridge. Can I take the potato kugel from the fridge and put it onto the chicken soup? Yes. Can I take the potato kugel straight from the fridge and put it straight onto the blech? Absolutely not. That's what we just learned. So how could it be? If the potato kugel was on the chicken soup on Friday night, how could it be that they're taking it and now putting it down when they move the chicken soup? All right. If I could take it from the fridge and put it on top of the chicken soup, so then it'll come out a joke, Rabbi say. It'll come out a joke. Is anybody going to say this is mutter? Oh, I have a great way to take my potato kugel and put it on the hot plate on Shabbos. I'll take it from the fridge. I'll first put it, I'm an amoyev, this week's parsha, Rabbi say, I'm an amoyev, right? I'll take my potato kugel, I'll put it on top of the chicken soup, and then I'll say a kapitel tehillim, and then I'll take off the potato kugel and put it straight onto the hot plate. Avadanat. That's called you took it straight from the fridge. You need the Tanai CHAZARA avadanat. But there are many people that have the minig that they put the potato kugel on the chicken soup, and then on Friday night when they remove the chicken soup, they take the potato kugel and they put it on the hot plate. This Rabbi say is a big tzarchian. So I'm going to tell you Rabbi say now limit schos, and you got to do it the way I say. Otherwise, it's not a limit. It doesn't work. Rabbi say, the fee, what we learned in the past, and we start to add everything together, you can say a gewaldig idea over here. Gewaldig idea. Rabbi say, over here, don't forget, Rabbi say, we don't even have the Ran. Because the whole word of the Ran was that you were on the fire as of when Shabbos came in. This is not called on the fire. I'll prove to you it's not called on the fire because obviously I can't take it from the fridge and put it on if it would be considered it would be considered that I was on the fire before Shabbos, so then I would be able to, like I just said, go straight to the fire. So now, what's the pshat? Now watch Rabbi say. Watch the beauty. Let's follow this potato kugel. Erev Shabbos, this potato kugel. What do most people do? Again, if you do it like this, you're in gold. Many people, they take the potato kugel from the oven, it's boiling hot, Erev Shabbos, and they want to now put it on the hot plate. Boiling hot from the fire, in the oven, they take it out, and now they take it, and they'll put it on the chicken soup like we said. Now, in Lumdis, Rabbi say, what is that? They know eventually they're going to be putting it onto the hot plate when they move the chicken soup. What's that? That's called daitalachzir. From when? From when it was on the fire. Which fire? The fire in the oven. It was on the fire, I took it out of the oven. I'm putting it here on the chicken soup. It's going to hold it for me. Maybe that's ke'ein and oida b'yadai. Instead of me holding it the whole time, I put it in a holding zone. And it's also daitalachzir because I know the second I move away the chicken soup, I'm going to put it down. So maybe I have oida b'yadai, daitalachzir, and it's not called alagabe karka. What was my kasha? My kasha is then according to that, why can't I take from the fridge and put it straight onto the cholent and then onto the hot plate? That's no shayches because there it was in the karka. And you don't have oida b'yada, you don't have daitalachzir. You weren't holding it, it was in the fridge. The fridge is the ultimate karka. So you can't take something from a fridge, put it on the cholent pot, and then put it onto the hot plate. Mashing over here, maybe you could say chiddush. Maybe you could say that I could take it from the boiling oven, and I'm not going to hold it for the next 3 hours. I don't have room in my hot plate. So what I'll do is I'll make a shliach to hold it for me. Who's that? The chicken soup. The chicken soup is going to hold it for me. And it's daitalax here. So it's coming from that fire and it's going to a fire and it's just being held in the middle. Come on, then you understand that if I take the potato cook and I actually hold it, so then I'd be able to put it on the fire even 2 hours later, as long as it's hot. So I found the moifis. I found a way that I could hold something for 2 hours with a daitalaxer. I put it on top of the chicken soup. And then when I move the chicken soup, I put it on the fire. Why is it so important to know the landis? Because you better explain this to your daughters, Rabbi Isai. You're going to say, Mommy does this. That's our minig. Rabbi Isai, there's a lot of people that they just saw their parents do this. They didn't understand the landis. And then what happened? They did it all wrong. Some people, they cooked the potato kugel already on Thursday. They bake the potato kugel Thursday, Friday morning. And then after it's finished, they take it. They leave it on the counter. They put it in the fridge, whatever. Then they take it on Friday afternoon when they're setting up the blech, and they take that same potato kugel that they saw their mother do. And she took that potato kugel and she put it on the chicken soup. And then when she moved the chicken soup, she put it onto the fire. And that, Rabbi said, your mother did it and she was mutter. You know why? Because she was coming from the fire. But you're not coming from the fire. Oh, that's a whole different story. If you're coming from the fridge, so then you're lacking in oida b'yada, you're lacking in daita lahachsir. You're coming from the karka and you're putting it onto a chicken soup, and that's a vada also. The same way I could do that on Shabbos, just like I understand I'd be able to do that on Shabbos. So then it's going to be, if I could take it from the fridge and put it onto the soup on Shabbos, obviously I would not be able to do it on Erev Shabbos, get it to a place where it's warm, because it's not on the fire. And it's not a daitalaxer, it's not yadabir. So you're taking something which is not on the fire and putting it on the fire. So Mali, if you're coming from the fridge and doing that, and Mali, if you're doing it on Erev Shabbos. So Baisai, when you understand the landis, it's wunderbar, more so Baisai. The fetus, now you understand something else. Let's say it's Shabbos, and you have a cholent there, and you see that the potato kugel is a little bit burning. The potato kugel is getting burnt. It's on the hot plate mamish. And you see it's getting burnt. So what do? You pick up the potato kugel and you put it on top of the cholent. Rabbi Isai, so wait a minute. And now, right before the meal, you want to put it back and get one more heat. That's what some people do. The fetus landis, it's givaldic. We have the ran because it was on the fire as when Shabbos came in. But now we have another svara. When I take the potato kugel and I put it onto the chicken soup or the cholent, it's a holding ground for me. That's oida b'yada and daitalaxir, and therefore I could put it back onto the fire. Givaldic. But you must know the landis and you must explain it to your children, or they're going to do it wrong, and they're going to Erev Shabbos when they're setting up the blech. They're going to take a potato kugel out, put it on from the fridge, and put it onto the chicken soup, and that Rabbi Isai is vaday not mutter. And I saw that the Chazon Ish says it's aser. And some say that the Chazon Ish is going to say it's aser, what I just described. But if you look good in the Chazon Ish, it's not at all muchach. Maybe the Chazon Ish is talking about the person that's taking the potato kugel out of the fridge. But we don't have a right that the Chazon Ish wouldn't hold of the actual idea of the holding ground. So if you heat up your item right before Shabbos, and then you put it onto the top of the chicken soup, so then you'll be allowed on Shabbos to put it onto the hot plate. That Abaisai is part 2. And now, Bez Hashem, we'll finish the grand finale over here. We'll try to say, what do I do, taka, if my cholent is burning? What do I do, lemaisa, if my cholent is burning out? I have here.
Put it down
Sorry?
on the counter? What the shallow was if you put it, the Rav, the shallow was you put it on the counter.
I can't hear, sorry.
Can you hear?
Yeah, a bit.
If you in this operation you put it down on the counter, you didn't put it on.
If you put it down on the counter from where? From the oven?
The oven, counter, and then into the.
So that's I would say is not great. It's not lechatchila because you get involved in the counter shaila, but it's nishkaferlach because that's the whole shaila of the counter. How we down a counter? I would certainly not love it.
That may get any better.
I prefer that he has at least his hand on it or something like that. No, maybe. It's not the worst thing. Maybe a counter. No, not the worst thing. But it's not as great as what I was saying.
Microwave? What's the question?
Maybe I see the shaila microwave. I see the shaila. Maybe it's a can be made. Okay, you know what? That's a very good shaila. That's a very good shaila. That's a very good shaila. It's something that I have to think about, and it's a very good shaila. Okay, now we have a chalent that's burning. Now, by say on this burning shaila chalent, I have about 10 different shailas. I can't go through all of them. I'm just going to speak out some of them, and let's see what we do. I have a chalent that's burning out on a Friday night. I got to get water into this chalent to prevent the burning, to go straight to the sink. Chas v'shalom rachmana litzlan. That's just a deraisa. There's even a shaila if the chalent will be aser b'diavad. That's a non-starter. Okay, now I got water from Gevaldik, my thermos, Erev Shabbos. I filled up a thermos, not on the fire, a cliche, a thermos, good old-fashioned thermos for this emergency, in case my chalent is burning out. Also non-starter, because that water is on the karka, it's not on the aish. There's no question, that's called on, it's not in a fire right now. I have water in a thermos. I'm going to take that water, which has not been on the fire as of when Shabbos came in, and I'm going to take it. The whole aleph base is CHAZARA. CHAZARA means you're coming from a fire, going to a fire. You're not coming from a fire. So that's, you can start saying as far as that we just spoke about, I put it from an urn into a thermos in order to use for that. Okay, that you need to be a big mechadish to say. Okay, so that's also non-starter. The next non-starter is if I'm going to be taking the chalent and I'll get the water in there somehow, cooked water from an urn or whatever, we'll see. When I'm going back, the aleph base is that you have a blech inside your crack pot. If you don't have a blech inside your crack pot, non-starter. Right there, non-starter, because you need to have gar for katan. We mentioned once in our Shulchan. Okay, but avada, you need the daita, lahachzer, the tnaim, the chazar, but the most important, you need grufa v'katuma, right? Now, we don't have the problem is the chalent fully cooked, because most probably if it's burning out, the chalent is fully cooked. We do get the chalent that we spoke about that time, or the bones fully cooked, but in America, my understanding is not everybody's eating those bones, and the marrow bones you can't eat anyway, so thus it does. So now, tachlis, after we get through all that, now, what do? I have a blech, my water's in an urn, I got to get from there into the chalent and onto the urn. Now, there's one other thing I'm going to mention right now, which is also not really our sugya, which is the sugya of agasa, that there are those that hold that you certainly can't, you can't mix the chalent on the fire itself. Mixing it off the fire, we could be makel. Getting the water in is a little bit of a shaila of agasa. The mitzvah, the general consensus is if you pour in the water slowly and you mix it slowly, when it's off the fire, that's not going to be a problem. Then you'll put it back onto the fire. There's another issue, is the droplets on the lid. Okay, so what I do is when I have this problem, I take the lid and I leave the lid on the hot plate so that the droplets stay hot. Or you can take the droplets and just shake them off 3 times, and whatever's left is bottle. Those shilas we're not going to discuss, or we just did. Now, get the water in the chalent and get it to the hot plate. What do? I have 2 choices. One is I could take a cup, fill it up with water, pour it into the chalent, the cup from the urn, obviously, pour it into the chalent, mix it around, and then put it back onto my verblecht crackpot or my blecht chalent, my fire, whatever. That's one option, to take a cup as an intermediary, a klisheni, and to pour it into the chalent. You'll have to probably lift it off of the chalent, of the crackpot, because otherwise when you're pouring it in on the fire, that's a form of agasa, and you might come to mix it, etc. So you picked it up, you poured it in with the cup, you mix it around, you put it back. That's one option. We'll see the problems with that option in a moment. The other option is, no, I'll take the chalent straight. Why are you wasting a cup? Take the chalent, go straight to the urn, pour in the water, and then mix it around, and then put it back. Those are the 2 options. Each one of them has an issue. The issue of the urn, we'll go right to the urn. The issue of the urn, the chayra, is more of a kashrustic issue. You want to have a coffee in the morning. Now the steam went up and it went all over your spout, and it went. Not only that, there's a nitzik, there's a continuous stream between the water the urn going straight into your cholent. So now the cholent goes through the stream that's called nitzach chiber, and it goes straight through this is a mishtan machshirim. It goes straight through the stream and goes straight into your urn. In the morning, I want to have a coffee. How am I going to have a coffee with my milk? How am I going to have a coffee with the milk? The cholent has gone into the urn. So that's one issue. Maybe that's why somebody would want to avoid this issue, and he'd want to instead use a cup. The problem with the cup is we have two very big problems with the cup. Problem with the cup.
CHAZARA.
Sorry?
CHAZARA.
Oh, so we have a major shaila of pina mimecham l'meicham. We have a problem that I'm taking the item which is on a fire and I'm being mefane, I'm pouring it into a different pot. And there's a whole sugyas Gemara of pina mimecham l'meicham. Are you allowed to take this fire pot? I can do chazara on the pot. I want to take a cholent pot, take it off and put it back. I can do chazara. But can I take a cholent, pour it into a pot, and then take that pot and put it back onto the fire? That's called pina mimecham l'meicham. It looks like a whole new thing. That's already a mechsi k'mevashel. Bishlam, if I'm just going back in the original pot, it doesn't look like mechsi. If you have all the tnayim and the grufa ketumbas. But if you don't have the same pot, this pot was never on the fire. It looks geferlich. That's a ibaya in the Gemara. That's one major problem of using a cup. Another major problem using a cup, and this is a major issue for the Svardim, is the Svardim have riesige chumras when it comes to bishul. And the Svardim hold that when you take a cup of boiling hot water from a kli rishon, from the kli rishon on the fire, and now you put it into a kli sheni, so they hold kli sheni is not mevashel. Kimoi that they hold kli sheni is not mevashel. They also hold that it's not cooked. It does not cook, and it is not cooked. So they have a boiling hot cup of water. If you're a Svardim and you put your finger in the cup of a kli sheni and you burn yourself, you're not bikoris, because the Svardim hold that cup of a kli sheni is not hot. And if you take that kli sheni, says the Pri Megadim b'das mechaber, and you pour it into a kli rishon on the fire, you're cooking the kli sheni. So by the Svardim, they have no eitzah. The only eitzah the Svardim are going to possibly have is to go to the urn, which we'll see in a minute. That might be the kashrus issue. I heard from Rabbi Sion Abishel's nephew. He told me that what the Svardim do by them is that they take a bag, like a cholent bag of water, and they leave it in the cholent, or the chamin, in case they have an issue, and then they stab that bag. So that bag was always inside the cholent. It was always a kli rishon. And then they stab it if they need it. Stam gewaldig. Okay. So what do we do? So Rabbi Yisai, there's also another problem I forgot to mention. I'll mention it b'kitzer. There are some urns that don't get up to 212. They only got up to 190.
We didn't see it here.
When you go onto your cholent, you're taking water that never got to 212, and you're making it go from 190 to 212. And this is a world war. Is there cooking from when something is already yatzaledis by to fully cooked to becoming 212? This is a world war. The Moshe Shelton is not. Others hold there is. There's a malkim to be makel. First of all, if your urn gets to 212, there's no question, even though it went down now to 190. But if your urn doesn't get to 212, it gets to 190. So maybe 190 is called mevushal called sarchai today, because if the urns only go up to 190, so maybe that's mevushal called sarchai. Void, when I'm putting in the water, I'm not trying to cook the water. I'm just trying to get the water to enable the cholent to not get burnt. So that's a melach shein tzich legufa. There's a lot here, but let's say that wouldn't be the problem. So what's the issue? Number one, let me take the cholent. I'll go over to the urn and I'll put it inside. So shaila is nitzek chiber. Now your cholent went in through the water and went through into the cholent pot. In the mail in the morning, I won't be able to have a coffee. The zayah, the steam, is sitting there right by the spout, and it goes onto the spout. And when it goes onto the spout, it's fleshik. It just went onto the spout. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to have a coffee. I can't put milk in there. Now, Baisai, I must tell you, when you learn your Deya, we'll learn it one day together, you'll see that chumrah is a very big chumrah, because the zayah is in an open area, and the zayah, even though you think it's burning hot, but the second it leaves the pot, the zayah is not so hot. And therefore, it's not yatzaledis. Maybe you should wipe off the spout. Maybe you shouldn't put it right to the spout. But if it's a normal thing,
as soon as you take it off, it's not yatzaledis. As soon as you take it off,
the steam. Go do it. Try it. take a cholent pot, boiling, burning. Take your hand and put it over here about, about a foot off of the top of the cholent pot. You'll see the steam is not going to burn your hand. If you put it very close, it's going to burn your hand. But it right away dissipates. You'll see. Go and do it. That'll be the homework. It really isn't that hot as you think. So it's not yet to let us bite. So maybe the steam is not an issue. Maybe lechatchila, maybe wipe it off, this, that. Okay. What about the nitzik? So if you look in your day, you're not going to find anywhere that nitzik is a problem of heter and heter. The only time the Ramah brings down in Siman Kufay Tziv Zayin a problem of nitzik is when you were dealing with treif. So you have a candle which has, fats and shumans and all types of treif of fats, and it's a boiling hot candle, and on top, there was a nitzik being poured in. So then there's all shaila because it was treifus. But over here, by heter and heter, to create the isser is harder. If the isser is already here, so then it's a little bit easier. But if there's no isser to create basar b'chalav through a nitzik, we don't have a raya, says the Goyin Rishon Bazalman in the Morah Shabbos and Chelik Beis in the 584th page. We don't have a raya. It's a little bit complicated. When your day, you'll see the nitzik, if the top one is hot and the bottom one is hot, there's no nitzik. It's only if the top one is cold and the bottom one is hot. But I admit that this is a little bit difficult. But halacha l'maisa, that is not an issue. So if you want to do it that way, that is one eitzah. But what if your tak is still nervous, epis when it comes to kashrus? We have separate everything, separate kitchen, separate everything. So now you want to take the cup and put it into the cup, and you're not a Svardi, because then for sure you wouldn't be able to do this, because a Svardi would consider this to be a klisheni, and once it's a klisheni, you're putting it into a kli rishon, and you're cooking the klisheni. But the Ashkenazim hold, no, once it's hot, that's not a problem. So the only problem the Ashkenazim have is the din of pina mimechem lemechem. So then we're going to be Messiahim. What's the halacha of pina mimechem lemechem? I know I'm taking a cup, pouring in the water from the urn, and now putting into the cholent, mixing, putting it back onto the black place. But that's pina mimechem lemechem, because this water in this cup was not on the fire beforehand. Oh, but Rabbi Isa, if you're listening with a good ear, this has nothing to do with the shaila pina mimechem lemechem. The most rishonim, what's a shaila pina? What's the machsi? I take the water, I take a cholent, I pour the cholent into a separate pot. You know what that looks like, Rabbi Isa? It looks like you're coming to cook. It looks like who knows what over here. Also, in the second pot, it gets cold. What are you doing? You're taking something from the fire, putting it into a pot, and putting it onto the fire? It looks like you're cooking over here. Rabbi Isa, that has anything to do with our case? Our case is that you need a bridge to get you from the urn straight there. If I was putting the cup on the fire, we could talk. But what am I doing? I'm not taking the cup and putting it. Everybody sees this as a chatimtza of just me getting that water from the urn into the cholent. So everyone looks at this as it's kivyachol, that same svar that we held, the holding ground before. The cup is a holding ground, just a chatimtza. So maybe that's not the mechsi of the pina mimechem. The mechsi of the pina mimechem was what? That it looks like he's putting it into a whole new apparatus, and what's going on over here? He's coming to cook. This thing was never this pot was never here. You're right, and this cup is not going on the fire. So we don't have to look at this cup. If this is the cup that's going in the fire, then that cup was never there. But the cup is also not going in the fire. You're taking something from a fire, putting it to a fire in something that was on a fire, so then we could look at this cup as just a bridge. Now, these are chedushim, you think. Chedushim. But you have to remember that in general, klape the shaila of pina mimechem lemechem, so that itself, Rabbi Yisai, is a Gemara in Daf Lamed Ches. The Gemara is a safek. There are about 5 different ways in the Rishonim to learn what is the suffix. For example, the Rabbeinu Tam learns that you're going from pot number 1 to pot number 2, and that's a klisheni, and that's the pot which is going back on. Well, that's not what's happening here. The Ran learns, at least in the second shot, that the case of pina mimechem is you're going from pot number 1 to pot number 2, and then you're going back to pot number 1. Not like my case, pot number 1, 2, 3. It's pot number 1 to pot number 2, and then back to pot number 1. And that the Ran says it's a pina mimechem. The suffix is, it looks like you put it on the karka in the middle. You put it on the klisheni, you put it in this cold area in the middle. Oh, that's a shayla. But that's not doima to our case, Rabbi Yisai. Our case, both of them aren't doima. Our case is he's taking it with a cup, so you see it as a chatimtza just to be getting from there to there. And this halacha, even if it would be pina mimechem, so that's true. The Mogen Avram is Machmir and Sivkat in Chaf. And Ramosha, Zechron Levrach and Chele Beis Simin Samich Tes, Dibra Maskul Lahoitzi is Machmir on the Shilas of Pinel Mechel Mecham. But Rabbeinu, the Mishnah Brura, in Shartzi and Sivkat in Mem Zayin says the words, V'lo Yiskarti Pinel Mechel Mecham, that the Mogen Avram mentioned. And over here, the Mishnah Brura is taking a very, very, very serious stance. He's going against the Oil Shabbos, the Mogen Avram, the Toish Shabbos, the El Yurab, the Mamish, everybody, the Balatanya, the Maimon Mordechai, is fighting the whole world over here. And he says, I'm not being machmer in the shaila of pinam nechel and mecham, even the real shaila of pinam nechel and mecham. I'm telling you, our case isn't even pinam nechel and mecham. But even if it would be pinam nechel and mecham, the Shartzian says, I'm mekel. You know why? Because beloved hachi, there are days that are mekel and mecham sheni. Ayin b'tois v'sviran. Okay, nilnis daiti pashit yesh lismay chala mekilim. Since it's all shaila to learn the sugya of pinam nechel and mecham, it's not clear what the ukimt is. So therefore, you can be mekel like the mekilim. Now, in our case, it would come out that Lafi Rabbeinu Tam says the shaila of pinam nechel and mecham is from Kedera Aleph to Kedera Beis, and Kedera Beis is going back on the fire. Our case is clearly not like what Rabbeinu Tam was worried about. So therefore, tachlis, if a person wants to take a cup, put the water in the cup, pour it in the chalent, so then that won't be pina mechel and mecham. At least there'll be a reason that you'll be able to be mekel. I guess it's like a gather of you see, he's only just trying to get that water in there. So therefore, getting your chalent to not burn out. We have 10 shilas, I think we mentioned. The kashrus shaila, there's a makom to be mekel. If you want to go straight to the urn, just don't go all the way up. If you don't want to get into that shaila and you want to put it in a cup and pour it in, so we have the pina mechel and mecham shaila you have to be mekel on. The water in your urn was never cooked. It only got to 190. You'll have to be mekel and say that's called either mavushal called tzarach because it's 190, or you'll say like Rav Moshe that going from Michael ben Drusai water, dainu, yad to let this water to fully cooked is not called bishul. Or you'll say like I said, he's not trying to cook the water. It's malchshen tzrich legufa. So he's not trying to cook the water b'chal. I malchshen tzrich legufa is aser. So b'makim this, you could be mekel like Rav Moshe. We had another shaila, klisheni, the Sfardim are not going to be able to do this because you're taking klisheni, which is something which isn't cooked. In their world, if you pick a finger into a klisheni, it's not going to be hot. A good the Svardish Yid, he's not going to, it's nicht heiß. It's like, so the mela, now you take that cup, because Svardi can for sure not put it into the chalent. So he has to pop the bag, which is inside the chamin. The other shilas we discussed, the shilas of Zayah, the shilas of Nitzuk, but now, B'ez Hashem, Rabbi Say, your chalent won't burn. Just make sure that you have a blech and make sure you're not coming from a thermos, and you'll be able to save your chalent for Shabbos. And with this, Rabbi Say, we just finished Reish Nun Gimel. It's Hashem next week. Hatman.
Okay, Yeshka, quite a Rav. Am I hearable?
Hard to hear?
You can hear me? Okay, so the shall's here about this Lamaisa. Getting the water into the chalent, which as the Rav mentioned.
Okay, I can't hear. I'd love to hear, but I can't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Who is it? Okay, so his mic is no good? Mine's working good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Apparently, from our side, it seems to be good. So the shaila here was Lamaisa. The chalent is burning. Want to get water into the chalent, and we have all these offsetting issues. So the chiniks are usually very heavy now these days. Not so simple to bring chiniks, hold them on top. From what I understood from the Rav, it's got to be a foot over the zayah. Am I right about that?
I don't know about a foot. I was saying it only for this year. It's probably about even, I think already by half a foot, the zayah is not going to be a problem.
So, okay. So half a foot, the zayah is not going to be a problem. You got to get these big fancy chiniks. They're quite heavy, especially if they're full of water, and you got to get them over and you got to lean them in a way which does not have the zayah problem. And that's the preference.
So then we are mekel on a cup. We're certainly mekel.
Okay. So the cup is l'chatchila, you say?
Oh, listen, on Friday nights, when I have this shaila, I use a cup.
Use the cup.
Because the way my urn is set up is I can't move my urn. And it's on the milchik side.
You're going to you pull out the plug or whatever.
Basically. I can't start to.
Basically, the Rav is being, what's coming out, you're being Samech and the Mishnah Berurah connected the rest of the world.
100%.
Why?
Because the Mishnah Berurah is number one, Pina Mechel Mechel, Mishnah Berurah is Mechel. And number two, this might not be Pina Mechel Mechel. Everyone might agree over here. This is
So
just a
it's,
chatimta to get it from the water to the cholent pot.
So it's a sort of the sfex fekel halacha, and therefore
Basically, on Dorabanan, it's a ganz fine
wouldn't
makom in Mekel.
and therefore the Magen Ram wouldn't control here because it's not a pinal mechel lamechel.
I don't know. I don't even know if we have a Magen Avram. The case of the Magen Avram is talking about is clearly not our case. So we don't even have a Magen Avram. It's not like I'm saying a chiddush. I'm going against the Magen Avram. That the Shartzian was willing to do. I'm not even good saying that. I'm just saying this is b'chlal not the case of the Magen Avram.
One of the questions Ilam had here: why did the Mishabura put it in the Shartzian and not put it in the Berlach or the Mishabura? Because it was such a big chiddush. What does he want us to do? I mean, he knew that all the other Paiskim are saying l'chayra otherwise.
That's a very good shaila. That's a very good shaila. That's the kind of shaila I like. That's a good shaila in the Mishabura. That's a shaila that appreciates every drop of ink in the Mishabura. That's a bumper shaila.
Okay. In other words, that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Okay. Rabbi
Sai, am I right that some people have the minig of the potato kugel? I think a lot of people have this minig. The old Hungarians all had this minig, but a lot of them do it wrong. They were taking straight from the fire. That's what their bubbas were doing.
Can you explain that again?
Can fridge in the hain.
Let's explain that twice again so we know that we're getting it right.
The potato kugel that they were taking from the oven today and going straight onto the chicken soup. And then when they take off the chicken soup, you put the potato kugel down. So the way I explained it, so that's like a lot of people have that minig, but if you're going to do it wrong, it's geferlich. If you're taking it from a lot of people, they just know this thing. You put it on the chicken soup, and then when you take off chicken soup, you put it down. Minig I was saying to be daini. I was nicht gevenazay in the hain. In the hain, nicht gevenazay. You used to take it from the fire, put it on, and that's why it was going to be other. It was a gevaldik alumnus. The first person that ever did this, his wife was a rebbitzin. The husband was a rav.
Okay, Rabbi said tonight at 8:45 there will be